What's up, guys? So today we have a podcast with Vigorous Steve. We're going to break this one up like I've done a few times in the past. Part one is going to be on my channel. Part two is going to be on Steve's channel. So there's going to be a link below to his YouTube, to his website, to his Instagram. Make sure to check all of that out. So I actually didn't know Steve well before the podcast. Loved how the conversation went. He's an intelligent guy. You know, it was a good back and forth. He has a lot to offer. His channel definitely delves into some topics that we don't talk about too much on this channel, but I like that. I like variety, and he's an intelligent guy that backs up a lot of what he says. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Definitely go check out his channel after this. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I appreciate it. All right, everybody. So today on the podcast, we have Vigorous Steve. I got put in contact by Leo Rex, who was on. He had mentioned actually Steve, and I had seen Steve. I'd seen you and him have a collaboration on a few videos. And so actually before he even mentioned you, I thought I should get you on, and then he did. And I was like, all right, we got to make it happen. So welcome to the podcast.
Cool. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
And so, with all of these, I start with a little charity donation, and talking with Steve beforehand, we decided we will stick with Operation Smile. So for those who aren't familiar or who are new to the podcast, Operation Smile works with children who have cleft lip and palate deformities, so getting them surgeries, and there'll be a link below for anybody interested in helping out there.
Yeah.
So Steve, for people who don't know you, my space has kind of traditionally been the what they call like evidence-based fitness industry, which it's definitely branched out from there, and that field, I guess, itself is a little I think it's hard to define at times, because some people who say they're in that space are not really evidence-based, and it's kind of all over the place. So I noticed that you and Leo both talk with a lot of people who are enhanced or from like the professional bodybuilding side. So what is your background? How'd you get into it?
So my background is actually knowledge engineering. So I went to university for a subject called knowledge engineering. It was all the topic, so it was based on computer systems. And then they tried how to automate that whole process. So whether that was the IT section or the business section or the project management section, that's my background. And then I did consultancy for about 4 to 5 years, up until 2009. And of course, the economic crisis of 2007, 2008, 2009, all the projects started declining. So that firm that I was working for went bankrupt. And then I decided, what, I think this taking this consultancy firm to court so I can get my salary is going to take about 6 months. So it took exactly 6 months before I finally got my pension back, and all the things that were, it was a horror story. So after those 6 months, I traveled for a year to Asia. That's how I ended up here. And then I realized, what, I'm never gonna work for a firm ever again. I'm just gonna do what I like, and that's bodybuilding. So ever since then, I've been self-employed and doing what I like, is helping people, and whether that's drug-free athletes or enhanced athletes and everything in between, half natties, right? That's what I've been doing, and it's of course been a progression ever since. Because in the beginning, especially, it's been almost 10 years now. 10 years ago, there was not the information that we have now, that we have access to now, and the science has evolved. So as the sport has evolved, I've been trying to evolve and learn along the way. So I'm never really stuck in my ways, and maybe things that I talked about 2 years ago are no longer valid because I learned so much along the way.
Sure.
So
So right
that's
now,
basically my short backstory.
and right now you're just basically doing entirely coaching then.
No, actually, I have multiple things that I'm working on. So I do fitness industry, of course, and then I have some stock exchange and cryptocurrency trading, and I try to keep my revenue streams spaced out, because even though like coaching is very involving and it's probably takes the bulk of my time, it's I probably go crazy. I did that in the first couple of years. You do coaching, and you have 50 clients, and it's very involving.
Yeah.
And then now I'm trying to diversify a little bit.
Yeah, I coach people as well, but my full-time gig, I'm a dentist, and so I've said before, I honestly don't know if I would really want to do just like the one thing all the time. Like, as much as I love training and nutrition and researching it and working with people, it's a nice balance, even like the podcast and Instagram and all that stuff. It's one, I don't like that it's so dependent on somebody else, in the sense that like Instagram, like I've had my account temporarily blocked before, just like randomly.
Yeah.
And it's like,
It can be gone like this.
exactly. which is crazy. I mean, there are people who literally make all their money on Instagram or YouTube, and it's like, dude,
I
like,
know.
what
Yeah.
if that just gets deleted? I mean, I've heard of that happening. It sounds hard. I can't imagine if it was just like, hey, at
Oh, it's
random,
super scary.
yeah, your
Yeah.
license could just be taken away. I'd be like what do you?
Well, that can happen also, you know.
In theory, it could, but nobody's just losing their like license to practice for no reason. Usually, I mean, maybe
Mm,
you can find some crazy exception, but I mean, I literally have heard of people on social media where it's just like gone because they got
yeah.
reported because somebody didn't like them. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. But also just the fact
Yeah.
that like social media can be kind of taxing, if you're like a big name. I mean, not really. I mean, my level, 99% of comments are very positive, right? But once you start getting
Right.
like the hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands of followers and stuff, you're always going to have somebody who's hating on you and you get these negative comments and
Absolutely.
stuff. So,
I think it changes you also because I've had friends that went from like 100,000 subscriber or followers to a million or 2 million,
mhm,
and it changes your personality. Because I don't think human is designed to interact with that many people. When you went to class, you had what, 30 other students,
right,
and
right.
that's about it, right? And when you're dentisting, how many patients do you see per day, or
Per
you
day,
know how many?
probably the same number, probably maybe like 30.
Yeah. So imagine if you get messages from thousands of people every day.
Right, right,
I mean, I wake up to 50 messages every morning, right?
right.
And that's done on Instagram. And then you go to your website in the contact form, your info@vigoroussteve.com. You see, another 20 emails. And then, so you wake up to like maybe 100 emails every morning.
Mhm.
And then hopefully you can, get that over with before
Right, right.
cardio starts.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, who's in the space before I got in the space. And
Mhm.
we were saying, like who is out there who has been doing this for 5+ years, who has a really big channel, and who has not over time had to either become like gimmicky, clickbaity, or change their personality. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
rare to see somebody in the space that long who doesn't change. I mean, I can think of a few people. Uh,
Hmm.
like as far I don't watch Jeff Nippert a lot, but if you know him, he's got like
Yeah.
2 million followers now. He seems to be pretty consistent.
Oh,
But
wow.
most
Yeah.
people, like Greg Doucette, how many people have seen that his old videos, he's kind of normal and
Right.
he's like a normal dude, and now he's like, Iago
Well,
Freeman and all
I,
that.
I, I think part of that, like, when you first start out, you don't really know how you're going to be received publicly. And
Right.
I had the same thing. I mean, I suffered a little bit from social anxiety disorder. And then over the last year, since I'm putting myself out on YouTube almost on a daily basis, you kind of get over that roadblock and you get a little bit more outgoing. And then as the revenue starts to increase, your confidence start to increase. And you see that with Kai Green,
Hmm.
with Greg Doucette, and then at one point the revenue stream is so large that they feel they can do whatever,
Right.
and you
Right.
see that in their personality. Whereas other guys that are very humble, like John Meadows, for example, I'm sure financially he does well because he comes from a financial background also, right? He used to work for Morgan Chase. No, where did he work?
I'm not sure.
He worked in he worked in the banking field, and it was doing quite well. So he translated that into turning his passion into a business, but he's still humble.
Yeah.
But it's not the norm, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, John's great, and he's one of the
Yeah,
few who I think is still stayed like a really good guy in the industry. He hasn't kind of been tainted by
right.
what this industry does.
He's like the Captain Picard of bodybuilding, you know.
Right. So, how did you and Leo get in contact? Because you guys are starting a new podcast, right? I think you just had your first
Yeah,
episode.
yeah. Yesterday we had or today actually it launched. So we recorded that on Wednesday. So in a couple days we'll record another episode. Leo was working with Amin, and they had a little bit of a blowout apparently. So he started his own channel because he realized he was, he liked it so much to help people through this YouTube platform. And then a couple of his subscribers said, "Oh, you got to get Steve on as a co-host." So and then waited a little bit. He started his YouTube channel. Took a couple months, and then we had our first episode, and then the second and the third. And now we decided, let's team up and then get Derek from More Plates, More Dates on the podcast once in a while if he can manage with scheduling issues.
Right.
And then and we'll do the Bio Bros, try to break the internet on a weekly basis
Right. Right.
with some new information, because like the fitness industry is so much regurgitation, right?
Sure.
And that's why I always laugh a little bit about when I see the science-based or evidence-based. I always say, like, okay, it's informative, but it's not your information. You found it on PubMed
Right.
and then present it to the audience. Whereas with real experience, you sometimes realize that, okay, the science is in the right direction, but the sample size is maybe a little bit too small to actually draw a suitable conclusion that is applicable for bodybuilding or fitness or health. And of course, like I'm trying to learn and you're trying to learn, what we know now, 5 years from now, we'll say whatever,
Right,
right?
right.
And the science, hopefully the science will adapt in the meantime. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to eventually talking with Leo again. And at some point, I
Mm.
know Derek's schedule is probably insane, but
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people message me and say that Derek reminds them of me, and I guess vice
Mhm.
versa. And I don't watch a ton of Derek's videos, but the ones I've watched, there's enough things where I'm like, he seems like me if I went on gear. like like
Yeah, I can see that.
there's
Yeah.
like certain personality aspects and just things that we've done, like as he's opened up about
Mhm.
like his personal life and things he's done in the past. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I did that around the same time. I did that around the same time. It's kind of funny. I
Okay.
think it would be an interesting conversation at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have you on the Bio Bros podcast for sure. I mean, you can join one of our channels because we'll go back and forth week to week, and we'll just get you on. That's yeah, of course, man.
Yeah, would love to.
Of course, of
So,
course.
you know,
So
I,
you
I
haven't taken the plunge yet.
what's that?
You haven't taken the plunge yet with
Well,
the
so
performance
I
enhancing drugs.
people go back to like, geez, I don't know how many episodes ago it was, but I was talking with Steve Hall and Abel Chabai, who are
Mm-hmm.
both in kind of like a different, they're like the natural bodybuilding realm. And so my
Mm-hmm.
story was I've been lifting since I was like 12,
Oh
and
wow.
you know I clearly did not have the best genetics for it, and this was not like an issue of like somebody who just was like messing around at the gym all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I, from like a very early age, had really good people like helping me out. I had
Okay,
people
that's good.
like who knew what they were doing, who followed like the evidence, and from like even both sides, like kind of like the sciencey natural guys and like
Mm-hmm.
a professional bodybuilder in my gym. And like Dante Trudell. At some point, I got to ask Leo why he doesn't like Dante because I know there's something there, but like
Well, you hired him apparently, but it didn't really work out. I
yeah,
like Dante. I have the occasional conversation with Dante on,
yeah.
yeah, on Instagram. Yeah, yeah. He always sends some of my clients like, "Oh, bro, you're so big," because they're like 120 kilos, and that gets Dante excited.
Right, right. Um, but anyway, so after 9 years of this now, I mean, so I'm
Mhm.
6'1", and after 9 years, so
Oh,
now I'm
okay.
like
Yeah.
21 years old, and I was
Mhm.
strong. I mean, relatively not on like internet strong, but like in my college gym, I mean, I was deadlifting
Right.
405 for like 14 reps.
Mhm.
I was incline benching 225 for 8. I mean, again, like
Yeah, that's
respectable
solid. Yeah.
for a skinny, 21-year-old, and
Right.
but I just wasn't like so at this point I started at 130 and I got up to
Yeah.
175. So now I put on, 45 pounds of lean mass, but
Mhm.
at a 6'1", I'm like at best looking like athletic. So then I had a few friends who started taking something.
Mhm.
And I was like, dude, I've been killing myself for like 9 years.
Oh
And
yeah,
this
it's,
super fast.
yeah, off the screen already,
Yeah.
within
And
one
they've been
cycle.
lifting for
Yeah.
like 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
So honestly, as rational and logical as I try to be, this was like one of the most important things in my life. I mean, I gave up social opportunities. I mean, I gave up a
Yeah.
lot to do it.
Same
So,
here, man. When I was that age, I was hardcore natty until I was like 26.
yeah.
So the first 11, I started at 15. So the
Okay.
first 11 years of training, I was, drug-free working on my base. And back then we had no forums, we had Intense Muscle. I
Yeah.
think that's still around, Ken Skip Hill still
Yeah.
maintains
It's
that.
kind
And
of
he's,
dead, but it's still around.
yeah, it's still around, right? But that's where we learned about DC training
Yeah.
back then, and then I was like 19 or something,
Mhm.
or 20, 21.
How old are you now?
Dude, wait, 37.
You're 37?
Yeah.
Dude, you look great for 37. Are you?
Thanks. I just came off cycle. So, if you would have talked to me like 6 months ago when I was like ballooned and saucy out of my
Yeah.
mind,
I want
I
to talk
would
to
have
you about that
liked,
at some point too.
yeah, I looked a lot different. So,
Yeah.
but back then, we only had the forums, right? And then you go to steroid.com and Intense Muscle, and everybody's saying, your first cycle 500 test and then a debulk kickstart, right? Which is
Right, right,
horrible
right.
advice. So I just patiently waited. I just waited and waited and waited. And unfortunately, I didn't have really good advice around me. So I had to take everything off the internet because people either were sauced or they were natural, like gym rats, where they don't
Right.
really care about what they're doing, right?
Right.
And then you have like this hardcore middle road of you're a bodybuilder, you want to stay natural, you want to make as much progress as you can, but it's not really going anywhere
Right. Yeah.
because genetics, right? And then at one point you're like, okay, you know what? Let's see what all the fuss is about. So I would postpone it as long as you can,
Yeah.
because like now I'm off cycle, right? And my natural testosterone is 460 nanograms per deciliter after, my baseline was 650 nanograms per deciliter when I was 26,
Okay.
and it's stressed out of my mind when I was doing the consultancy work. And then now, 10 years later or 11 years later, I'm 460,
Yeah.
which is I still recovered.
Right.
It's not
Right.
ideal. It's not ideal, but I'm able to hold on to like 95 kilos, 97 kilos of mass,
Yeah.
even though
And
that's
how
10
tall are you?
kilos over my natural potential.
About how tall are you?
And I have 5'9".
5'9". So I mean that's pretty big. That's one of the things I wanted to delve into too is the aging and you're talking about like your recovery. But just to finish up kind of what I was saying there, basically I was getting frustrated with that, so I started like looking into gear, and I got very deep into it. I mean I read Will Llewellyn's entire book.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot online. I talked to a lot of people about it. And ultimately, what happened was, well, I looked into it, but I'm extremely health conscious, and I've run
Mm-hmm.
into some like, pretty serious health issues in my life, and
Okay.
so that just like scares the crap out of you,
Yeah.
and so I had some like tests done, and basically my heart is like, meh, it's not so great, and I'm like, all right, like I just don't want to mess with
Mm.
that, you know what I mean? Like
What what is it going on? You have arrhythmias or some plaque buildup? What's going on?
So I kind of have like the opposite of what you see in steroid users. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody is using, just for people listening,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes if somebody has a life of weightlifting and using gear, you will
Right.
see what we call a concentric hypertrophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have the walls thickening,
Yeah.
and over time that can lead to a lot of issues. But
Right.
I have what looks like an endurance athlete's heart, where I have no thickening, but I have dilated chambers, and they're
Oh,
not
yeah. Is
sure
there
if
any backflow or no?
very minor regurgitation,
Okay.
but they don't. I've had cardiologists say they think maybe it was a virus. I got at one point, and I had some
Mm-hmm.
cardiomyopathy from there. They don't really know, which is very frustrating, of course, when you don't know the reason behind it, because then it's
Yeah.
harder to solve the problem.
Right.
So if I was like, an Ironman athlete, and then you did
Mm-hmm.
an echocardiogram on me, you'd probably say, oh, this is just from your athletic endeavors, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
don't do that much cardio. I mean, I do like a healthy amount of cardio. I do some interval
Right.
training and stuff, but not a ton. So what we see doesn't really line up with, the test results and how I feel and all that. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm very passionate about lifting. I've never, I have a lot of things I like to do, but I've never found anything that created that same passion, where I just like cannot wait
Yeah.
every day to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just not worth it for me. You know what I mean? Like
No, you gotta outweigh it. It's
yeah,
it's that simple. It's and I've had a couple of different health scares along the way, not serious ones, but where you think, you know what, it's like right now I'm off because I have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is almost resolved.
really.
Thank God. But it's like you're drug free, right? You got natural bodybuilding that's here, and then you start to get enhanced, and you complicate everything
Sure.
tremendously. And then you're still like you have your natural limit, which is just your muscle mass, and maybe you're going to get a little bit of hair loss and some acne. All right, big deal, right?
Right.
And then you add steroids to the mix, and then you have to worry about cardiovascular disease and glomerulosclerosis, and liver sclerosis, right? And it just makes it very, very complicated. So if you already feel that your health is not 100%, then I wouldn't want to take the risk either.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will think like, man, like if I just used gear, it would be so much easier. And it's like, well, the muscle growth would be easier,
Yeah.
but I don't know if your life would be any easier. I mean, if you're intelligent, you're going to have to monitor a lot more. I mean, how did you find out that you had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
I did an ultrasound of everything which set me back significantly. That was a big hospital bill, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
Actually, what happened is, so I can go back. I check my cancer markers every year, and the clinic is like, why are you checking your cancer markers? So I use growth hormone. So I want to make sure that my cancer markers are in range because growth hormone accelerates cancer growth.
Right.
So I check those every year, and then I saw my neuronal specific annulase out of range. So I went immediately to the clinic, to the hospital, said, do an ultrasound of my lungs and my brain because it's related to many different organs. And that's how they found the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So everything was clear, and the neuronal specific annulase came back into range when they tested it again, and a couple related markers, all in range.
Mm.
So luckily no cancer, because I do have cancer in my family, so I'm very wary about this. And then they say, okay, you have mild symptoms of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's like, okay, off cycle, let's take care of this first.
Yeah.
So I did my PCT, and of course, PCT drugs are not very conducive to resolving non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But on my latest blood work, it showed that my liver enzymes were steadily declining.
Good.
And now I think it's pretty much resolved. So I'll do another ultrasound soon and then see where I'm at and then decide which route I'm going to go forward. But honestly, I kind of enjoy being off cycle.
Yeah,
Between you and me and the audience.
it's funny.
That's
It's when I
blasphemy.
when I when I had taken the stuff in college. So basically, it was like the days when like pro hormones were around and everything. I mean, it was totally legal. Like it was my friend bought it
Hmm.
from a freaking GNC, and again, that's one of the reasons that it was such a big spike and then a quick crash is because like these
Right.
compounds. First of all, you never really know what you're even getting, but like I said, it was all legal stuff at the time.
Hmm.
My liver enzymes were like 10 times the normal range. I mean, like my
Yeah, probably
doctor.
super droll then.
I don't know if I don't think it had Superdrol in it, but it was during that time period when like Superdrol
Hmm.
was
That's why I
popular
see
and
the
all that
crazy
stuff.
liver enzymes in like
It was
200,
insane.
300.
It was like 600s. I mean, it was nuts. Yeah, it was
That's
crazy.
hepatitis.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was nuts.
That's hepatitis high. Because I've seen that blood work. Like I did a lot of competitors, right? And they finish off their contest prep with halotestin and Superdrol at the end because, hey, there's something to win. And then I send them for blood work, and I don't want to, but I still make them
Right.
because bodybuilders are, no, I'll go in 2 months from now. It'll be better. You say, yeah, but let's see
Right.
how
Right.
bad it is now, so we can take some affirmative action. 500, 600. And then the doctor says, maybe we should check you for hepatitis.
Mhm. Dude,
Of
I
course, it's temporary. You know how to resolve it, but with those pro hormones, the knowledge was not there. Nobody knew about TUDCA back then,
sure.
or injectable glutathione, or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Nobody knew how to resolve that, and there were many very famous naturals during that time who were
Oh yeah.
taking pro hormones, of course, because they were not on the doping list yet, and there were not any methods of testing, or classified as illegal substances. But those guys, when they open up later on, said they have terrible liver issues
hmm
because they were running these oral steroids all the time.
Yeah. Dude, when I was like 23 or something, I
Hmm.
had like a full panel of everything done,
Yeah,
and it read that like it showed, it's like green if everything's okay and red if it's not, and it
yeah.
showed hepatitis and it was red, and I was like, oh my God. But like I had just woken up, and so it's like
uh,
5:30 in the morning, and I'm looking at this and I'm like freaking out, and then I realized like, wait a minute, I've been vaccinated, and it was just the antibody titer.
right.
So, but like again, at 5:30 in the morning, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Right. Yeah, but I mean, so whether in this field, there's so much to learn, right? And for each blood work marker, there's a couple days of studying involved.
Yeah.
So it takes a while, and then you read about the blood glucose levels. Okay, now you got to reconsider the hemoglobin A1C
Mhm.
also, right? And so there's maybe 50, 60 markers that we need to keep into consideration, especially when you start taking performance enhancing drugs. So I would do my blood work every year when I was drug free because that was part of the healthcare system. You could do it 1 year for free in Holland for the healthcare system, and now I do it every 2 months because
Yeah.
I pay out of pocket, and I have my favorite clinic where I get a nice discount, and then I can do whatever I want. They got like hundreds of markers that I can check, but not everybody's in that position. Here in
Yeah.
Thailand, the medical situation is as long as you pay, you can do whatever you want.
How much does it
But I
cost
know
you every 2 months?
$100, $200 for a full one.
That's not
When I
bad.
did my the cancer marker panels was only $100.
Wow. You
And
said
of
you had
course,
an
when I checked,
ultrasound of your brain. Was it a CT scan or an ultrasound?
no, there was they did a, what is it called? X-ray of my entire torso.
CT scan, you think? Or you don't know?
I'd have to look at my medical file. It was like at least an X-ray of the torso and not of the brain, because the brain, of course, they had some markers, so I wanted to check the markers first. And a CT scan and an MRI is very expensive. I still
Yeah.
want to do an MRI on my heart and my brain, but it's
Yeah.
unaffordable, and it doesn't fall into my medical insurance.
Yeah,
So,
I only ask because I would be wary. Ultrasound, no issue. MRI, if you can afford it, no issue. I would be
mm,
wary about, some people have this idea that, oh, well, we should just scan everything constantly. And
mm,
CT scans are actually a pretty significant amount of radiation. So I
yeah,
would not recommend most people to just do like full body CT scans or anything like that.
no, or X-rays also, it's the same. I mean, there's a reason why those people walk around the corner so they don't get the people that operate the X-rays machine. They'll just, oh, wait, hold your breath. And they'll
Right.
walk like behind the lead wall
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
because they stand there every day, right? And so no, I've done a few of those just in case when it's needed. But for the brain, that was mostly just done by blood work to make sure that none of the brain-related cancer markers and the lung-related cancer markers that are not standard in a cancer marker screening.
Yeah.
So
Well,
those are
I
checked.
think
So,
though that's a topic that I do talk about sometimes because again, I'm not like anti PED or anything like that. It's more just like from my perspective being
mm,
so probably overly health conscious at this point because my own
yeah,
experiences, I'm just very wary and I see like, and again, I'm probably a little nutty compared to the average person with that. So I'm not saying like there's things that I won't do where it's like you're probably fine. I just don't even want to like consider it. But
mm,
even for the average person, uh, some people, it's great to get blood work. It's something
yeah,
Dante preached for a long time. You need to get blood
mm.
work. I always thought it was amusing when people would say, "Oh, well, my blood work off cycle is fine," and it's like, yeah, I mean, that's something to test too. But don't you want to know what's happening on cycle? You're on a freaking 16-week cycle.
Right.
What's going on?
That's where you can take some action and actually make your blood work better. I've got so much blood work on cycle. And that's the most important time to take it, because that's the
Yeah.
only time that you can actually make changes. And 3 months after your cycle,
Right.
it's pointless to do it. I'm sure it's good, and if it's still bad, then imagine how bad it was on
Yeah,
cycle.
then you really have a problem.
Oh
But
man,
one of my points was just that like, blood work is great, but it doesn't show
mm,
everything, I
no,
mean, there's a lot that it won't show. You could have an enlarged liver, you could have a
mm,
dilated or, you could have thickening of your walls. I mean,
mm,
you're able to pick up cardiac issues, not like atherosclerosis, but as far as like the actual myocardium, if you can pick that up on blood work, you're like way past the problem. I mean, if you have like very elevated BNP levels, for instance,
mm,
or I mean, obviously, if you have like high troponin levels or anything like that, you're having like serious issues. I mean,
yeah,
I would at least recommend like a yearly echocardiogram if you're on
right,
gear, and
mm.
some other things too we could talk about. But I'm just saying, like, don't people should get blood work, but they shouldn't feel like just because their blood work's okay, they're perfectly healthy because it's not always.
No, it's just a step in the right direction. I mean, an echocardiogram is good, especially if you're dealing with arrhythmias. I mean, what bodybuilders don't realize is that every time they take a set to failure, their heart stops and then it picks back up. So that's the perfect scenario to create arrhythmias for yourself. And how many people that I've talked to have arrhythmias just from training that intensity? I had to deal with that myself as well. You do the
Yeah.
DC training and you take 3 sets to failure, rest, pause. And then before you know it, you're walking around with a 48-hour halter, all
Halter
these
monitor.
diodes around, and then you walk around that and you have to shower with it
Yeah.
and train with it. And the doctor said, yeah, so here your heart stops and then it catches back up. And you're doing this 15 times during your workout. So you get arrhythmias during the day as well. And all these little things that most people don't realize, and you can't see that in your blood work results. Okay, your CPK is going to be elevated,
Yeah.
but it doesn't tell you the full story, and an ultrasound on your liver and your kidneys. And yeah, but not everybody thinks this way. You got to be a hypochondriac to dive into
Right.
the medical,
Yeah. Do you
because most
have
people just want the gains.
so you've had a Holter monitor before?
Yeah, I had
And
those arrhythmias, and it was
yeah.
scary because I would just sit there working, and then boop, I'm like, what?
Did you have
I'm like,
PVCs?
what the hell's going on?
Yeah. Was that
and it was
before or after using gear?
that was after, yeah,
After.
after, and it was not an electrolyte imbalance. There was no blood, so I had everything checked,
How
and
about
the doctors
echocardiogram?
also, yeah, echocardiogram, and then of course the doctor saw that it's there's no sinus arrhythmia or weird. Uh, I don't even know what the medical term is, but where the electric signal goes over the heart. I
Mhm.
mean, they were able to diagnose that I had a large heart, albeit symmetrically enlarged,
Okay.
and no thickening of the artery or the walls.
Oh, so you also have a dilated heart.
Yeah, so it's larger, but it's not thickened.
Okay. Do you have
Yeah,
any
and
measurements offhand? We could talk afterwards too, but
no, I don't. But the weird thing is, the last time I did my X-ray, and I've been using Nebivolol for months, prior during the last couple months, I was using Nebivolol, which is a beta blocker,
right.
and they said my heart reduced in size.
Really?
Yeah. And so the doctor was like, how are you able to reduce your heart? I don't know, ubiquinol, shilajit, fulvic acid, Nebivolol, not training so crazy anymore,
Right.
So, and of course, staying away from all this crazy androgenic steroids, because I
Now
was
what?
not afraid to take some trenbolone.
Right.
But that's like years ago, right?
Yeah.
When you
When you
realize that it's a
had
horrible.
the dilation, that was in an echocardiogram, but then later when they saw it was reduced, that was an X-ray.
No, so and it was an ultrasound.
Oh, it was also an ultrasound. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's great that you were able to do that. I wonder, was the first one on gear and the second one was off gear?
Both on gear, but the first one was on a lot more gear.
Okay.
The
Well, that is
first
one
one's
thing.
like a gram of combined stuff. And now the last cycle I did was like 250 test and 200 primo.
Okay.
Of course, there was growth hormone and insulin in that mix as well. I mean, it was 250 pounds,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
wow. Okay.
off season,
Big dog.
255 at the max. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, you learn as you go, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And,
Well, that
and
is
as,
one thing people should know is, ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, and
Mhm.
beta blockers, but more so beta blockers, can actually reverse cardiac remodeling that happens
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
response to using performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah.
So, if you are going to do it,
Might as well.
yeah, you should use a beta blocker if possible because, and I say if possible only because like there's some contraindications to taking. I mean, if you have a natural heart rate of like 40, like a resting heart rate,
Of
that's a
course. Yeah.
contraindication. Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
in most cases, you can. And I've considered that too. The problem is yours was probably, and I don't know, but it was probably due to your enhancement and your weight, right? So 250
Absolutely. No,
pounds.
hands down. I had no medical issues when I was drug free.
Right.
Of course,
Right.
back then I was living in Holland, and you can't go to the doctor and say, "Hey, can I preventively check all my organs with ultrasounds and MRIs?"
Right.
They
Right.
don't do that.
Yeah.
Preventative medicine in a healthcare scenario doesn't exist. It's only reactive.
Yeah.
So I've been doing all my preventative and perhaps reactive sometimes when there's an issue. I've done it all here in Thailand. So most of the medical details that I have about myself were when I was using steroids.
Right. 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 So.
So but the Nebivolol helped a lot.
Yeah, no,
And
it's
it's
great. I mean, and the fact that you're able,
mm,
you probably caught it early enough. I think that's going back to why my issue is frustrating is because it's like
mm,
you had a clear or probably a pretty clear cause of it, and then
mm,
Abivalol was able to then counteract that. For
right.
me, at this point, it's been almost a decade that I've been aware of this
Well,
issue. I mean, I could have had it
mm,
my whole life. I don't know because there's no foundation
yeah,
of it. But
yeah,
so if you don't have the cause, would that still help me? I don't recommend somebody who doesn't have a reason for it to just take a beta blocker or really any drug. If you're taking a drug, there should be a
mm,
reason for it. So,
right.
who knows? But anyway, the point I was just saying is like, obviously you want to stay on top of it. And it's great that, I mean, you sound like you're pretty knowledgeable on it and you're taking the steps necessary, but
I
that's,
try.
that's a lot more than most people. So,
Of course, yeah. Of course. The problem with beta blockers is when you're drug free, it's been shown to reduce testosterone concentrations. So, and it also is counterproductive to resolve non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because it does reduce your caloric expenditure, and your heart, of course, works on fatty acids. So, if you're trying to resolve fatty acids saturation in the liver, that's why I came off it now,
mm,
because I wanted to resolve the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But I think that's pretty much over. And then if I do decide to go back on cycle, then yes, Nebivolol and telmersartan will be both at a low dose, so I don't get too much interaction regarding blood pressure reduction.
Right.
And otherwise, you just get dizzy all day, right? That's
Yeah.
not what we want.
All right, guys. So that was part 1 of the podcast. Go over to Steve's channel, link below for part 2. You're going to see us talk about testosterone levels after one joins the dark side. We're going to talk about when people retire from bodybuilding and kind of the fall afterwards when you were enhanced versus natural. We'll talk about premature aging, which is something that Steve delves into on his channel, and kind of what happens when people use gear there. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about finasteride, which, as a lot of you guys know, is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. A lot of people use that to prevent hair loss, and we delve into that a little bit as well. So again, go to the other channel, check it out. Thanks, guys.